Let me see. This is how you bypass a fuel pressure regulator with a little bit of solder.
Maybe. That
Maybe.
might work.
Yeah. I just used a propane torch and heated that up, and like Dad's saying, it actually dimpled down in there, so it went up in the hole. But I'm trying to bypass this so that we'll get full pressure from here, and then we'll let the sniper regulator return to the tank. That way this tank doesn't overheat. It's got constant flow through it. But I'll show you a little bit later on how we go about a return line. Okay, we're back at it again. We're trying to get fuel to this 73 Ford that has a sniper on it. And we've tried 4 or 5 different ways to get it set up. I had the pump at the tank, which this little pump right here wouldn't suck. Even if it was in the frame rail below the tank, it didn't want to suck up the fuel. Okay, and then the most recent one is we had this pump, which is 45 gallons per hour, or like 132 liters per hour. Okay, and it sucks fuel from the tank just fine. It was feeding this pump over here, and when you let that thing run with the engine off and just running and circulating, it maintains pressure properly. Okay, but once the engine started, I mean, we let it run for like 10 or 15 minutes, but once you start the engine and you get engine heat in the engine bay that heats up, then the thing, it'll start to fall off and fall off and fall, and finally when you pinch the return line, the pressure won't come up. There's just nothing going through the regulator. And so then the pump starts to heat up and it gets worse, and pretty soon you got like 20 psi. But we did have to, the return line, I did have to change the return line to a 3/8. I mean, I've been through all kinds of stuff where I dropped the tank and drilled out the vent tube that I was using for the return. The little bitty 5/16 line ended up being too small because I kept having overpressure issues to start. And then no matter what system I've used, after 5 or 10 minutes, the engine warms up, and then the pressure would start to drop off. And I had it to where originally we started with the surge tank itself, where the fuel was just bypassing inside of it, and then this thing would heat up, start to, you know, because it says 140 degrees is when fuel starts to vaporize. Well, this thing would heat up and wouldn't supply it. Then I tried the pump at the tank, a new tank, a pump at the tank, and that wouldn't supply it. Then I tried this concoction with this pump and this pump pushing into it, and that seemed to work, but I was still getting overpressure issues. I changed my return line, and then that line, that helped it to where no matter what, we're sitting at 62 to 65. Okay, and so with the 255, I figured that 255 liters per hour, this thing's only running 132, and then once things warm up, it can't feed that pump, and it's only got like 5 psi pressure. Well, it's just not flowing enough to feed the pump. So then to verify that, I took this thing and I soldered that shut, that regulator, which I've got a couple extra regulators, because before we thought the regulators were bad. We're over, you know, we went through that where I bought couple of different regulators. I bought a new regulator for the sniper, which I never installed yet because I figured out it's totally fine. But what I did here is I soldered this shut, so now I have this pump feeding fuel in, and then the 300 liter per hour pump in there, which made things worse, is feeding fuel to the sniper, and it actually puts out 65 psi because my return line at the tank is only 5/16, right where it goes from 3/8 to 5/16 going in. But 65 is fine. 64, 65, dude, I'm not kicking on that. It'll stay there. But when you're flowing so much back to the tank with this little pump that's in here, that 45 gallon per hour, or that 132 whatever liters per hour cannot keep up, because I ran this to a tank, and sure enough, nothing's coming out, and this thing just sucks the tank dry within a minute or two, and then that's it. Well, I turn the main pump off and run just the little one and fill the tank back up. I'll have fuel just flowing right out of it into the can, turn on that pump, and this thing runs dry. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the original setup with this surge tank, and I'm going to put that other regulator back in here. So this is actually regulating and bypassing inside itself. I'm going to take the inlet, and I'm going to run a tube. I'm going to tap it and run a pipe down and add a hose to it, so that this pump is feeding fuel to the bottom of the tank, new fuel to the bottom of the tank. Then we will let this pump will be sucking fuel off the bottom, and it's gonna, anything that it too much that it uses that the sniper's not using, okay, which I'm gonna cap off the return from the sniper, which I don't really want to do because I would like fuel flowing through the sniper to keep it cooler. But I'm gonna cap it off and then let this thing regulate the fuel pressure going to the sniper. It'll be deadheaded, and then that way I'll have new fuel coming in to the bottom, okay, and then the fuel coming out would be going back to the tank. So this thing will be pumping its 130 gallons per hour, whatever it can pump, 130 liters per hour, sorry, whatever it can pump to keep this thing cool, and it'll have a constant circulation of fuel going through there. Now the 300 liter per hour can make whatever, 700 horse. This tank, the size of the tank, you can make 700 or 800 horse for a quarter-mile pass. I mean, so it's not like I'm gonna be low on fuel with a 180 or 200 horsepower engine here, you know, which later I want to add a turbo. I'd like to get like 450 out of this just for a daily driver truck, but that's beside the point. Anyway, I'm going to tear this apart, modify it, get the fuel going into the bottom, so the fuel just ain't, it's not just recirculating on itself. Get new fuel into the bottom, and then have the return fuel coming out the top and back to the tank, and we're going to see if this thing will stay cool enough, and then we should be good to go. The only other issue would be temperature of the sniper, because you know, some people have problems with their computer going out or this and that. But then after that, I can either use this little electric fuel pump to circulate the fuel, or I have over here this 140 gallon per hour, supposed to be 140 gallons per hour, at 6 psi or 7 psi. Anyway, I've got that pump that I could put on there to use if I really want to step my game up. But I mean, there's no reason why I couldn't just carry another little bitty pump that's 30 bucks in behind the seat, and even carry one of these little pumps behind the seat, because they're only like $40. And then that way, if either one of the pumps goes bad, I can just swap it out. I mean, it's no big deal. Anyway, let me get after it. Okay, the best thing would be, the best possible scenario would be if I used a 140 gallon per hour pump that could flow enough fuel to supply the 300 liter per hour pump and actually return to the tank. Have that pump feed this canister and have the bypass any excess fuel go back to the tank. That way the sniper would do the regulation of the fuel pressure, and this pump would just be flowing its full capacity, constant flow all the time through here and then back into here. But I'm not 100% sure that that mechanical pump would actually feed it. Once I get this thing working with it recirculating in itself, then I might try it. I might put this regulator back in here, put the mechanical pump on it. Otherwise, you'd have to get two of these. Two of these pumps would actually feed enough flow, but that's, you know, that's kind of overdoing it there. Okay, I know the best bet would be for this right here. Drop the tank, weld it to the tank. You got these two 3/4 outlets, mount the pump right beside it, and then push it to the front. But I'm trying to avoid dropping the tank and having to clean it all out and do all that welding on it. But in a worst case scenario, I may have to. But see, here's my plan. I want to do something like this to get fuel to the bottom of this canister. I want the fuel going to the bottom, so when the pump picks it up, it's always picking up fresh fuel that is recirculating, and then any extra fuel is going to come off the top. But I got to figure out some kind of way to, let's see here. Got to figure out some kind of way to put a fitting in here so I can put a hose onto the bottom. So the fuel will be always, this will always be getting fresh fuel, fresh cool fuel. Here you have it. This is the concoction that I come up with. This little pump is feeding the tank and returning back to the gas tank. Okay. This regulator is controlling the pressure that goes to the sniper. The sniper return is capped. So this is internally regulated, and the fuel that's being fed in here, I got a pipe that's coming down. I tap that out, 1/8 inch tap, and put a piece of pipe in it that I cut off, so it goes down toward the bottom, picks up the fuel in the little tank that's in the sock, pumps the pressure that it needs, and then this regulator, I didn't use the one that I soldered up because it flowed too much fuel. This pump couldn't supply it. So anyway, now we got full pressure. We've got 300 liters per hour pump in here. It's feeding pressure to the sniper so it can use as much as it wants to. And then this pump, all it's doing is keeping the tank full and keeping the tank cool. Otherwise, this thing will just recirculate and it'll overheat itself, start to vapor lock, suck air. But these gauges, I noticed, these Chinese gauges, which, I mean, really, I paid like $7.22 for this one. Maybe $7 for that thing. I mean, this is all Chinese stuff here. But I'm sure that Phytech use Chinese stuff too, because there's a difference in these gauges. I mean, this one's showing 50 something and this one's showing 60. Now, we let this thing run for like 20 or 25 minutes. And when you get a bunch of engine heat and all this stuff is heated up, I don't know if these gauges get hot, which the gauges get hot, but your pressures start to show like 52. And it just stays at 52, which is the first time that I've had constant pressure. And I double checked this thing, and while it was running, took the line off, made sure that I had full flow going back to this. Even when everything was totally hot, I made sure that I had flow coming through here. And then I got a heat gun. I was checking it with a heat gun, and the hottest it got was, what was it? 98, 95 or 98 or something like that. 90. It wasn't much of my skin temperature was about the same as what this thing got up to, even though the engine was running at like 205. After sitting here idling for so long, man, normally with it out in the air, but it was recirculating in here. Okay, anyway, this just shows it's working. The only thing, yeah, we'll go in the house in 1 second. The only thing I don't like is that I'm deadheading to the sniper. And that thing, if that computer on the front gets too hot, could smoke it. I would much rather have the flow going through the sniper to keep it cool. Anyway, I'm going to buy me some hard line, get 25 feet of 3/8 line so I can run it right from here back down the frame rail to the tank, so I don't have this 3/8 hose going all the way. And then I'll be set. Okay, let's go in the house now. You on camera? Nah, phooey, it's too late for you, isn't it?
Ah, Chewy. Oh, look at this sad face. Let's go. Come on. Let's go. Let's go.